Deep within the mountains, in the territory of the demonic cult, a chase unfolded under the cloak of night. A young man ran desperately, his lungs burning for air. The escape had already lasted too long. Exhaustion and injuries weighed heavily on his body, but the will to survive kept him moving. But in a moment of carelessness, he stumbled. He tumbled down the embankment, completely out of control. The fall was harsh and left him utterly drained. Fallen and exhausted, he cursed his luck. It seemed there was nowhere left to run. Yet, even on the ground, the flame of resistance had not yet extinguished in his gaze. Frustration turned into rage. He wouldn't accept this fate without a fight. It was then that his pursuers finally revealed themselves, watching him from above, like predators. The young man looked up and understood everything. He wasn't just being hunted, he had fallen into a trap. The realization that everything was planned ignited a fury that overcame his exhaustion and pain. The assassin's leader called him Young Master Cheon, mocking his delay in reaching the end of the line. Cheon found himself completely surrounded. His enemy's blades gleamed in the darkness, ready for the final blow. Desperate, he questioned why they wanted him dead. Cheon stated he had no intention of joining the academy, that he was no threat to anyone. But the assassin made it clear his intentions didn't matter. The mere fact he was a potential heir was his crime. The assassins gave the final order. Time for talk was over. Now they demanded Cheon's life without further delay. But one of the assassin's words echoed in Cheon's mind, a direct insult to his mother. That was a line he couldn't accept being crossed. The offense ignited a fury he hadn't felt before. In that moment, Cheon decided he wouldn't die without a fight, no matter how impossible it seemed. He drew the only blade he possessed, a desperate last resort against far more experienced enemies. The assassin's leader watched the scene with contempt, ironically questioning if the boy even knew how to fight. The answer was obvious. Cheon's stance was that of someone who had never held a weapon to fight. He had no idea what he was doing. However, even without any technique, the young man's refusal to surrender impressed the assassin. He saw the strength of Cheon's lineage in his stubbornness, which made the hunt even more interesting. With a signal, the coordinated attack began. 4 assassins advanced on Cheon at once, giving him no chance to breathe. Instinctively, the young man moved, dodging the blows with surprising agility, albeit awkwardly. One of the enemies approached with a swift and precise strike, aiming to end the fight once and for all. But, to everyone's surprise, Cheon managed to block the blade. The impact was brutal, but he held firm. The assassin wasted no time, and seizing the opening, delivered a direct punch to the boy. The difference in strength and experience was too great. In an instant, Cheon was grabbed by the neck and lifted off the ground, completely defenseless. The group leader smiled beneath his mask, declaring the game was over. His eyes gleamed with the certainty of victory. But Cheon still had one last trick up his sleeve. With his free hand, he plunged his small blade into the assassin's body, reversing the situation in a blink. The other assassins were shocked by the sudden turn. They hadn't expected the boy to have the courage for such a desperate counterattack. The blade sank into the attacker's body. Cheon used all his remaining strength, determined to take at least one of them with him to the grave. The others' initial surprise gave way to fury. They realized they had underestimated their prey and that the game had gone too far. The blow was fatal. The assassin fell lifeless to the ground, and Cheon, exhausted and wounded, collapsed right after, too weak to stand. Even on the ground, a satisfied smile appeared on Cheon's face. He felt he had no more tricks, but at least he'd taken one of his enemies with him. Now it was 3 against 1. The remaining assassins surrounded him, ready to finish the job once and for all. There would be no more underestimation. The next attacker prepared for a decisive blow, giving the boy no chance. And then, the attack came. Swift and precise, aimed directly at the fallen youth. The blow struck Cheon squarely, throwing him back with brutal force. The power difference was still immense. The impact left him breathless, spitting blood. It seemed his body had finally reached its limit. The assassin approached, showing no mercy. For him, the mission was one step away from being completed. Cheon saw the blade descending towards him. It was the end. He had no way to dodge or defend against that final blow, but at the last second, an intense white light shone, and a cry of pain echoed through the night. Only, it wasn't Cheon's cry. The young man coughed, completely confused. He was still alive. The blow that should have killed him never landed. The assassin who was about to finish him was now impaled on his own sword. Cheon had no idea how that had happened. Completely out of strength, Cheon clawed at the ground. He had already used all his tricks and had nothing left. The assassin leader pressed his foot against Cheon's wound, crushing any hope the young man might still have. The humiliation was complete. Defeated and immobilized, Cheon was at the mercy of his enemy, who was preparing for the final blow. The leader sighed. He didn't like the situation, as they had lost a man to a mere boy. But in the end, the job was done. Until, out of nowhere, an intense light shone in the forest. Caught by surprise, the assassin leader didn't understand what was happening. His companion was also perplexed, questioning the origin of that sudden flash that appeared out of nowhere. Before they could react, one of the assassins was instantly obliterated by an invisible force. The execution was so brutal and swift that the enemy's blood splattered onto Cheon, who watched everything without understanding. The remaining assassins grouped together, on high alert. The hunt had turned into a trap, and they were the prey. Suddenly, one of them felt a presence and yelled for them to look back. In the mist, a silhouette enveloped in a blue aura appeared. It was no one they knew. The mysterious figure emanated a strange energy, crackling like lightning. That wasn't the chi of a Murim master. It was something completely different. The newcomer wore bizarre clothes and seemed completely calm, arms crossed, as if the assassins posed no threat at all. The leader broke out in a cold sweat, terrified. He didn't know what that was, but he knew he couldn't win. With Cheon already losing a lot of blood, he decided the mission was complete and it was time to retreat. But the mysterious figure had no intention of letting them go. With a subtle movement, the newcomer finally sprang into action. The assassins were already in full retreat, running as fast as they could to escape that terrifying presence. But in the blink of an eye, the figure vanished from where it stood. A flash of light cut through the forest's darkness. Before they could react, the fleeing assassins were intercepted by a blur moving too fast to be seen. The first of them barely had time to register what was happening. The figure reappeared in the middle of the group, enveloped in a crackling and dazzling energy. The remaining assassins looked back, panicking. They didn't understand how he had disappeared right in front of them. The leader tried to rationalize what he saw, questioning if it was some advanced Murim technique. But the truth was, it looked nothing like anything he knew. In an instant, another attack decimated one more of his men. The blue blur passed through them like lightning. Terror seized the next assassin, who saw death approaching without being able to do anything. The attack was so fast, it was impossible to defend against. The figure disarmed the last assassin with overwhelming force. As the carnage unfolded, Cheon remained on the ground, feeling his body grow colder and his vision darken. He was on the verge of death. The order to retreat came too late. Cheon was already running for his life in a desperate escape. He used everything he had to try and evade his pursuers, leaping through the trees under the moonlight. But a sudden flash reached him from behind. The blow was devastating, throwing his body through the air and sealing his fate. It was the end. It was then that a mysterious figure appeared. With an ironic smile, the newcomer commented on how Cheon seemed to be in good spirits, even bleeding to death. Cheon's vision was fading. He didn't understand what the stranger meant by ancestor. His body was growing cold, and his consciousness slipped away with each passing second. He could barely move, life slowly abandoning him. Who was this young man, and what did he want? The stranger glanced at a device on his wrist, as if checking the time. Then, he pulled out a small object emitting a blue light, something Cheon had never seen before. He approached and said he needed to hurry before Cheon died for good. Without any warning, the young man plunged the object directly into Cheon's neck. The needle pierced his skin, injecting an unknown substance into his body. With the task done, the stranger explained that these were state-of-the-art nanomachines and hoped Cheon would succeed. The rest, he'd have to figure out himself. Cheon remained on the ground, completely at the mercy of that man, and a technology he couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, a strange mechanical voice echoed inside his head, announcing that the nano-machines were activated. The mysterious figure left Cheon with one last instruction, saying the rest was up to him now. And in the blink of an eye, the stranger vanished in a beam of light, leaving Cheon behind, alone and unconscious. Cheon was at his limit. His body, wounded and exhausted, began to give out. Death seemed inevitable. But suddenly, he felt something. A strange, unknown sensation coursed through his body, coming from within. In his mind, images began to surface. Visions of a distant past, showing how martial arts evolved over time. He saw battles, sacrifices, and the harsh reality of the warriors who came before him. The visions showed training, meditation, and the study of countless techniques compiled in ancient books. And those who mastered these techniques achieved power far exceeding that of an ordinary human. They became legends, masters revered for their strength and wisdom. Cheon saw the great clans and armies that shaped history, each with its own leader and ambition. He witnessed the rise of great lords, who commanded the loyalty of thousands of followers. And among them, one figure stood out, the Demon Lord. As the images passed, Cheon realized the voice he heard wasn't a whisper, but something vibrating directly inside his head. Suddenly, everything stopped. Cheon awoke with a start, gasping and confused. He looked at his own hands, barely believing what he saw. He was alive. After all that, he had survived. But how? The last thing he remembered was being stabbed. He tried to understand what had happened, but his mind was a chaos. The feeling of being alive didn't last long. Soon after, a strong nausea overcame Cheon, and he barely held on as his body reacted violently. He felt something sticky and dirty on his hands, a substance that definitely wasn't there before the attack. Looking at himself, the young man noticed the same disgusting grime covered his entire chest, leaving him with a horrible feeling that something was very wrong. That's when he heard it, a voice that came from nowhere and, at the same time, seemed to echo from inside his own head. Completely startled, Cheon sprang from the bed, trying to understand who was there with him in that room. His eyes swept the room, desperately searching for the source of that mysterious voice. But there was no one. The voice wasn't in the room. The terrible truth began to form in his mind. It was inside him. The voice confirmed his worst fears, calling him user, and leaving Cheon even more confused and terrified. Desperate for answers, he demanded to know who it was. The voice then explained it was communicating directly with his brain. The revelation was too much for him to process. The idea of something inside his mind, speaking to him, was terrifying and utterly insane. He tried to piece things together, remembering the words of the mysterious figure who saved him. The voice in his head confirmed his suspicion. It was a nanomachine. The shock of the confirmation hit him hard. It wasn't a demon or a spirit, but something he could barely comprehend. Completely shaken, Cheon fell to his knees. He asked if this was the legendary machine, a revered entity he knew from stories. Meanwhile, outside, a doctor named Bayek was being escorted by a guard. He was being rushed somewhere urgently. The guard confirmed to the doctor that the situation was grave. There had been an assassination attempt on the young master, and the doctor's presence was crucial. The young master's guard indignantly reported that he never imagined the enemies would have the audacity to separate them for such a brazen attack. Dr. Bayek listened carefully, realizing the story was far stranger than a simple assassination attempt. And so, as they walked, the guard began to describe the terrible scene he encountered upon arriving at the location. He relived the shock he felt the moment his eyes witnessed the aftermath of the massacre. Amidst the squad's disfigured bodies, he recounted that only one remained untouched. It was one of the assassins, fallen with the dagger the guard himself had gifted to the young master. The rest of the elite team weren't so lucky. Their bodies were completely annihilated. It was then that he found the young master, fallen on the ground and covered in blood, but by a miracle, still breathing. Back in the present, Dr. Beck processed the information. The young man was alive, but the account defied all logic. The guard added that the master's clothes were pierced, yet his body bore not a single wound. Beck pondered that impossibility. It was as if the young master had been healed the instant he was wounded. Aware of the gravity, the two quickened their pace towards the young man's chambers. Meanwhile, Cheon confronted the voice in his mind, desperately asking if it was the great machine who had saved him. The entity replied that it didn't fight the enemies, but saved him from death through a process it called self-regeneration. Cheon had no idea what that meant. The voice then informed him it was transferring the necessary information directly into his brain. Cheon was confused, questioning if the voice wasn't the legendary machine, as he had thought. The entity ignored the question and only wanted to know if he was ready to receive the information. The instant the transfer began, a shockwave coursed through Cheon's body. An absurd amount of data was forced directly into his brain, overwhelming all his senses. The pain was so intense he could barely breathe. His entire body convulsed from the information overload. The reaction was violent and immediate. The young man couldn't contain his nausea and vomited on the floor. The process finally ended, leaving him weak and coughing, utterly exhausted. With his head spinning, he tried to understand what had just happened to him. The voice then confirmed, billions of nanomachines existed in his body. He wasn't dreaming. Cheon sighed, feeling the weight of that reality. His life had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. He asked if the nanomachine could leave his body, but the answer was disheartening. It would only leave if he died. The young man reflected on his terrible situation. His half-brothers wanted to kill him, and as if that weren't enough, now he had strange machines inside him. The feeling of powerlessness was overwhelming. He didn't know what to do with this new and bizarre reality. Suddenly, a knock on the door broke the silence, interrupting his thoughts. Startled, Cheon ordered the nanomachine to be quiet, fearing that whoever was on the other side might hear it. Trying to dismiss whoever was at the door, Cheon yelled for them to be quiet, still worried they might hear the voice in his head. But the door opened anyway. The guard and Dr. Bayek entered the room, catching the young man by surprise. The guard rushed to the bed, relieved to see Cheon awake. He asked how the young man felt, but then a terrible smell hit him. The odor was so strong the guard had to cover his nose, wanting to know where it came from. Cheon, still lying down, understood nothing. Meanwhile, Dr. Bayek merely observed the scene in silence. He seemed to understand something the others hadn't yet realized. The doctor then approached and addressed Cheon, who immediately recognized him as the family physician. Bayek asked to check his pulse to better understand his condition. He held the young man's wrist to feel his vital energy, and what he discovered left him utterly shocked. Cheon's condition was unlike anything he had ever seen. Seeing the doctor's reaction, the guard panicked. He grabbed him, demanding to know what was wrong with the young master. The tension in the room rose, with the guard desperate for an answer and Cheon watching, confused by all the commotion. But to everyone's surprise, Dr. Bayek just chuckled. He didn't seem worried about the situation at all. The doctor's reaction left Cheon and the guard even more bewildered. They asked what he meant by that. It was then that the doctor revealed something unbelievable. Cheon's body wasn't sick. On the contrary, it was in perfect condition to learn martial arts. Cheon looked at the grime on his body and finally understood. That dark substance and awful smell were the toxins that had been expelled from his system. Cheon was in shock, wondering if the nanomachine was responsible for this drastic change in his body. Amidst the confusion, he tried to communicate with the voice in his head. The system asked if it should reactivate the sound, and Cheon desperately accepted. The nanomachine then explained that it had removed all toxins and converted his blood vessels, tendons, and muscles to an ideal athletic state. Cheon could barely believe what he was hearing. He questioned the identity of that technology, which insisted it was just a machine, not a machine. The voice assured him that, with current medical technology, it would be impossible for anyone, including the powerful sixth sex of the demonic cult, to discover its existence. Meanwhile, in another room, Dr. Bayek gave his assessment. He declared that the young master was perfectly healthy and only needed some herbs. A brief memory of the past surfaced, showing how fragile Cheon had been since birth. The conversation then turned to the demonic martial arts academy, a grand event that only happened once every 10 years. With the academy's opening, the competition among clans would become especially fierce. And Cheon's sudden recovery was a mystery to everyone. The candidates from the other 6 sects were already preparing, but now Cheon's body was as strong as any of theirs. Cheon's confidence was renewed. With his new power, he knew the academy would be much more interesting that year. Back to reality, Cheon was startled to see the doctor approaching. He felt relieved, thinking the doctor hadn't noticed anything about the nanomachine. As the doctor turned to leave, Cheon reminded himself that no one could discover the technology in his body. But Dr. Baek wasn't entirely convinced. There was something about that miraculous recovery that didn't make sense, and he became thoughtful. The guard, on the other hand, was beaming and thanked the doctor enthusiastically. But Dr. Baek's serious expression indicated the story was far from over. Outside, Dr. Baek remained pensive. Cheon's miraculous recovery was something he had never seen before and couldn't explain. He wondered how it was possible for someone to transform so completely overnight. It defied all the medical logic he knew. The doctor recalled the young master's past, a boy who was cast aside by everyone, simply because his body was incapable of learning any type of martial art. However, despite his weakness, His Holiness's blood ran strong in the boy's veins. There was a potential there that no one, until that moment, had managed to see. He reached a conclusion. If the Lord himself was secretly helping the young master, it wasn't his place to question or reveal anything. It was better to pretend he knew nothing. Meanwhile, back in the room, Cheon breathed a sigh of relief. Apparently, the doctor hadn't noticed anything about the nanomachine. At least, that's what he thought. He realized that, despite the technology's help, his life was saved thanks to Guard Zhang. If the guard hadn't found him in time, none of it would have mattered. Cheon decided he needed to thank the man who risked everything to save him. He tried to stand up to express his gratitude, but Guard Zhang stopped him instantly, telling him to halt. The guard explained he had one condition for letting him get up. First, he needed a bath. And urgently. The smell was unbearable. Cheon looked at himself and got the message. After expelling all those toxins, the smell really wasn't the best. A short while later, immersed in the warm water, Cheon finally had a moment to process everything that had happened and understand his new powers. He decided to test communication with the technology in his body and called out to the nanomachine. The response was immediate, directly in his mind. Cheon questioned the limits of the system's healing ability. The nanomachine explained that external injuries and internal organ damage could be healed very quickly. However, the machine added that blood or flesh loss would take much longer. The answer left Cheon a bit disappointed. It wasn't such an absolute power after all. Still skeptical of the power's limits, Cheon decided he needed real proof, something he could see with his own eyes. Without the slightest hesitation, he grabbed a dagger and cut his own hand. Sharp pain shot through his arm, but before he could cry out again, the nanomachine began the healing process exactly as promised. He was speechless. A strange sensation took over his hand as the wound began to close before his eyes. His skin stretched and regenerated at an absurd speed. In a matter of seconds, the bleeding stopped completely, leaving only a red mark that would soon disappear. The reality of the power he now possessed hit him hard. It was far more incredible than he had ever imagined. If the healing was real, he wondered if all the other abilities the machine transferred to his mind would also be usable. After finishing his bath, he got ready to leave. But as he stood up, he noticed something incredible. His body had been completely restructured, with muscles that looked like they had taken years of training to build. At that moment, an elderly maid entered the room, bringing clean clothes for the young master. As she helped him dress, the old woman remarked that he was talking strangely again, not understanding that Cheon was conversing with the machine in his mind. Already dressed and in a new room, Cheon wondered what his next step would be. So many powers, so many possibilities. His gaze was drawn to a bookshelf, a familiar place, but one that now seemed different. He picked up one of the texts, perhaps looking for a starting point for his new future. With the book in hand, Cheon decided to test another ability. He gave a mental command to the nanomachine, asking it to start scanning the text. The pages of the book began to turn on their own, at an impressive speed. In the blink of an eye, all the information was processed, flowing directly into Cheon's vision like a river of digital data. Seconds later, the process ended. The entire book on acupuncture points had been completely scanned, but the nanomachine went further. It asked if Cheon wished to transfer all that knowledge directly into his brain. He accepted, and the transfer began with a violent shock of energy that coursed through his mind. It was an overwhelming pain, as if an entire library was being forced into his head all at once. His body trembled uncontrollably, barely able to lean on the table. And then, everything stopped. Cheon stood there panting and in shock, trying to understand what had just happened. The nanomachine, with its cold logic, simply informed him that the transfer was a success, and that he would soon get used to it. Exhausted, Cheon slumped into the chair. He had all that knowledge in his head, but he had no idea how to access it. The system explained that he just needed to think about what he wanted to know. Instantly, the theory of meridian channels and chi flow became clear in his mind. The young man was utterly dumbfounded. It wasn't just memory. He understood every word, every concept in the book as if he had spent his entire life studying it. It was unbelievable. And to add to his shock, the nanomachine revealed that it not only copied the text, but also corrected several errors it found in the original book. After the nanomachine's revelation, a chill ran through Cheon. That knowledge wasn't just power, it was a weapon, and he finally understood how to use it. Facing the clan that had scorned him so much, the young man felt a new determination. His time as a victim was over. The uncertainty that haunted him gave way to an iron conviction. For the first time in his life, Cheon knew exactly what he needed to do. His path was set. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, an unfriendly conversation was taking place. A subordinate knelt to deliver his report. The young master couldn't believe what he was hearing. The news that the mission failed was simply unacceptable. The assassin reported that the 5 men sent to eliminate the target were annihilated, and he suspected that young Master Mugeum had help from a hidden master. Fury consumed the young master. That wasn't just a failure. It was a complete humiliation. The subordinate tried to justify himself, admitting he underestimated the target. He thought someone of such low birth would be completely defenseless. However, the subordinate's justification only served to further enrage his superior. To him, underestimating an opponent based on their origin wasn't a simple mistake, but the height of incompetence. Tired of excuses, the superior decided he would solve the problem himself. He made a death promise to Yeoun Cheon, setting the final encounter at the Demonic Arts Academy. As the academy awoke to a new day, the threat against Yeoun Cheon's life hung in the air. The morning's apparent calm merely hid the storm about to begin. But the target of all this conspiracy didn't seem to care at all. For him, it was just another day beginning, completely oblivious to the danger surrounding him. But his tranquility was interrupted by an unexpected notification. The system questioned him about an ability to copy others' movements, which left him visibly confused and a little worried. It was still dawn when Cheon opened the door. The notification about his new copy ability wouldn't leave his mind, and he knew this would be a decisive day for his future. The door slowly opened, revealing the courtyard. And there was the perfect opportunity he'd been looking for to test his new, mysterious power. In the courtyard, Gorjang performed his training routine with impressive precision. Each movement was a display of power and refined technique honed over years. His strikes cut through the air in a deadly dance that Cheon could never learn through normal means. It was the perfect technique to copy. The nanomachine confirmed it was possible to scan and transfer the technique to his brain, but raised a moral question. Was it right to steal the guard's knowledge without permission? For Cheon, it wasn't a matter of morals, but survival. Without hesitation, he ordered the system to begin scanning immediately, but something totally unexpected happened. As the guard continued his training, oblivious to everything, Cheon's mind was flooded with information. What the nanomachine began to show wasn't just the sword technique he was seeing. It was something much, much bigger. The initial surprise quickly turned into pure astonishment. He could barely believe what was happening. The nanomachine revealed it already possessed a vast database with countless martial arts, fighting styles Cheon had never seen, from worlds he hadn't even imagined existed. Outside, Garjang continued his training, completely unaware that his technique was about to become just another file in Cheon's growing arsenal. Faced with so many possibilities, any moral doubts vanished. To survive in that place, he would need to use every tool at his disposal, no matter the cost. With the decision made, Cheon gave the command. The nanomachine began scanning, focusing on every detail of the training happening outside. Garjang moved with the fluidity of years of practice, executing his dagger technique with impeccable precision, completely unaware of what was happening. Cheon's eyes, enhanced by technology, registered everything. Every movement, every weight shift, every muscle contraction was analyzed in real time. A martial art that took 20 years to master was being dissected in a matter of seconds. The nanomachine's processing speed was absurd, capturing the essence of a lifetime of training. In just under an hour, the system confirmed. All techniques were successfully scanned. The copy was perfect, but transferring that mountain of information to Cheon's brain came at a price. A sharp, sudden pain hit him with full force. Exhausted, he fell to the ground. The process was complete, and despite the suffering, he realized his body was getting used to it. It was getting easier. Suddenly, it clicked. The complete understanding of the dagger technique flooded his mind, and the young man was shocked by what he felt. An incredulous smile spread across his face. He hadn't just learned the movements, he had completely mastered them, skipping decades of training. Driven by an uncontrollable impulse, Cheon stood up and rushed to test his new ability. He picked up a training blade that was nearby. Holding it, he felt as if it were an extension of his own body. He now knew Jang's technique like the back of his hand. There was just one small problem. He couldn't let the technique's true owner see him. That would raise suspicions he couldn't risk. So in secret, Cheon began to execute the form. The knowledge was in his mind, but his body wasn't yet ready for what was to come. With a single strike, the training dummy shattered into pieces. The force behind the movement was far greater than Cheon had ever imagined possible. His body moved with terrifying fluidity, executing the dagger technique with a perfection that wasn't his own. Every movement was precise, swift, and deadly. The attacks flowed one after another, a blade dance he had only seen in his mind. It seemed too easy. But when he stopped, Cheon looked at his own hands, completely shocked. He didn't recognize the strength his body had just demonstrated. That's when the nanomachine's voice echoed in his head, questioning if the information should be transferred to his muscles. Before he could answer, an excruciating pain exploded in his body, as if lightning had struck him from within. He collapsed to the ground, screaming. It felt as if all his muscles were being torn apart simultaneously. Trembling uncontrollably, he gritted his teeth to endure the agony spreading through every fiber of his being. The nanomachine then explained the cause. He was suffering muscle and tendon damage from using an advanced technique without the necessary physical conditioning. Exhausted and aching, Cheon finally slumped to the ground. His first attempt to use his new knowledge had been a complete failure. His chest burned. The voice continued, clarifying that while his brain understood the technique, his body hadn't mastered it yet. The nanomachine admitted the explanation was complex and offered a more direct solution to the problem. Even sweating from pain, the determination in Cheon's eyes didn't waver. He wasn't going to back down now. He calculated the time he had before entering the academy. It was 2 hours. That would be enough. He gave the order to proceed. Then, the nanomachine asked one last question. If he wanted to go through the process awake, without being put to sleep to avoid the pain. Cheon didn't need to answer. The nanomachine initiated the transfer, and a current of energy surged through his body. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, making him tremble from head to toe. He barely had time to regret his choice to stay awake. The process was far more intense and painful than he could have imagined. The sensation was as if his bones were being broken and remade one by one. an agony he had never felt before in his entire life. His body trembled uncontrollably, and he gritted his teeth to keep from screaming. Every second felt like an eternity, but he refused to pass out. Finally, his body couldn't take it anymore. Cheon collapsed to the floor, completely exhausted by the excruciating pain. Meanwhile, in another part of the residence, Guard Jiang was in the kitchen, preparing a meal as he always did. He tasted the food, checking the seasoning, a routine he had followed with dedication for years, for a very special reason. As he chopped the vegetables, he remembered why he did it with such care. It wasn't just a job for him. A long-ago promise came to his mind. A promise to a very important person who was no longer among them. He remembered the last words of Cheon's mother, Lady Hua. On her deathbed, she asked him to look after the young master, leaving the boy in his hands. And now, that same boy was about to enter the dangerous demonic arts academy. Jiang worried about his future. Suddenly, a loud noise from the young master's room broke his reverie. Something seemed very wrong. The shock was so great that the knife slipped from his hand, embedding itself forcefully into the cutting board. Without a second thought, the guard rushed to Cheon's room, forcefully opening the door and shouting, desperate to know if he was okay. And there he was. The young master, fallen to the floor, completely motionless. Jiang's heart froze, fearing the worst. Desperate, Guard Jiang checked the young master's pulse. He needed to know if Cheon was still alive, if his promise to Lady Hua hadn't been in vain. But feeling a firm, strong pulse, his worry gave way to deep confusion. What on earth had happened in that room? It was then that something on the floor caught his attention. They were footprints, but they weren't ordinary footprints. There was something very strange about them, something Jiang knew very well. The marks were sunken into the wood, as if made with immense force. They were identical to the marks he himself left during his most intense training. At that exact moment, Cheon awoke with a start, completely disoriented and gasping for breath. He looked around, trying to understand what had just happened to his own body. The overwhelming pain had simply vanished. The young man sat up, realizing he wasn't alone. Guard Jiang must have entered the room after hearing the noise. Without wasting time, Cheon picked up his dagger from the floor. He needed to test something, to confirm if the change he felt was real. Standing, he focused. His body felt different, lighter, stronger. It was time to see if the memory of that technique was still there. He took a deep breath, calming his mind and preparing his body for the movement. And then, he began the first sequence of movements he had memorized just by watching the guard train. The movement was instantaneous. An energy he had never felt before flowed through his body, guiding the blade with a precision and power that left him shocked. Each cut was faster and more powerful than the last. He felt he had completely mastered the external technique, even without having the internal foundation for it. Cheon could hardly believe it. The movements that were once just theory were now executed perfectly. The nanomachine not only healed him, but transformed him into something much stronger. Cheon moved with incredible speed. The sequence of movements he had only observed was now executed with a precision and power he never imagined possessing. Finishing the last strike, he released the dagger, still trying to process what his newly transformed body was capable of. And then, a confirmation sounded in his mind. The first sequence of the technique was complete. He had mastered the movement perfectly, but the power was so great that he couldn't control the final impact. A single step was enough to completely shatter the wooden floor of the room. Cheon was in shock, realizing the noise he had made. That would certainly attract someone's attention. The damage was done. The floorboards were completely destroyed, and there was no way to hide it. He immediately thought of Guard Jiang. If the guard saw it, he'd ask questions Cheon couldn't answer. And as if fate was playing a trick on him, knocks sounded at the door. It was Jiang, bringing his breakfast. Too late. In a panic, Cheon desperately tried to push the broken floorboards back into place, but it was a completely futile effort. The guard opened the door, calling for the young master, still unaware of the chaos that had taken over the room. In a quick move, Cheon dragged a table to cover the hole in the floor. The guard found it strange, commenting that he always ate by the window. Cheon quickly made up an excuse, saying he wanted to change things up a bit since he'd be going to the academy soon. He just hoped the guard would believe him. Seeing the food, Cheon realized the guard had prepared all his favorite dishes. This might be the last meal made by Jang he'd eat for a long time. It suddenly hit him. The emotion of knowing he was saying goodbye to an important part of his life struck him hard. The sudden shift in emotions was so intense that his body reacted, leaving him frustrated that he couldn't control himself even then. Cheon channeled all that emotion into the food, devouring each piece with fierce determination. He promised himself he'd savor every last crumb of that moment. Jang watched from afar, telling the young master to take it easy. Cheon's haste was so great it looked like he was swallowing the food without even chewing, which worried the guard a little. When he finished, Cheon placed his chopsticks on the table and thanked Jang for the meal. The gesture was simple, but carried a meaning far beyond just the food. Jang seemed to understand the weight of that gratitude. It wasn't just for the meal, but for all the years of care and companionship he had offered. But suddenly, something caught Cheon completely by surprise. He had no idea what was about to happen. Jang began dragging the table, the very one Cheon used to hide the hole in the floor. The young man's heart pounded. It was too late to stop him. With a dull thud, the table was moved, revealing the completely shattered wooden floor. Cheon's secret was exposed for all to see. Jang looked at the damage, then at Cheon with a serious expression. The silence that followed was heavy, and the young master braced himself for the worst. Cornered, Cheon admitted to himself that, blinded by Nano's powers, he had used a strictly forbidden technique in Murim. He was ready to accept Jang's contempt, but Jang's reaction wasn't anger. On the contrary, he congratulated the young master on his achievement, saying it didn't matter how he learned it, the result was what counted. Those words broke Cheon's barrier. Jang's unexpected kindness, instead of a scolding, hit him hard, and he couldn't hold back his emotions. Jang then handed him a piece of paper. Confused, Cheon asked what it was. The guard explained they were essential tips for circulating qi in the dagger technique, and that he should learn better breathing techniques when he arrived at the academy. As Cheon held the paper, a tear fell onto it. It was proof of the care and trust Jang placed in him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. And there, he finally allowed himself to cry. Not from sadness or frustration, but from gratitude. After feeling alone for so long, he realized he still had a home to return to. Guard Jang advised Cheon to cry out everything he needed to now. He explained he wouldn't be by his side at the academy, so it was time to grow stronger, without fear or hesitation. That moment brought back a painful memory, the day he lost his mother. That day, young Cheon made a promise to himself that he would never cry again. A promise he broke because of Jang's kindness. The guard picked up the tray he had brought. He turned and walked towards the door, leaving Cheon alone with his thoughts. Jang left the room, giving the young man the space he needed. And for the first time in a long time, Cheon allowed himself to feel everything. The pain, the loneliness, but also gratitude. He cried like he hadn't since he was a child. The door closed. After letting it all out, he wiped away his tears. It was time to compose himself. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Cheon understood that, although his mother was gone, he was no longer alone. He still had a place to call home and someone who cared. With this new determination, Cheon set off for the academy. The place was imposing, a new world full of challenges and opportunities. A crowd of new students was already gathered, all anxious and nervous about what was to come. The buzz was significant. Amidst the crowd, the tension was palpable. Students commented on the sheer number of people and the importance of the place, which also hosted the grand tournament. Suddenly, the gates opened. An imposing figure entered, and silence fell over the place. The real test was about to begin. The imposing figure who entered was the cult's leader. He looked at the crowd of young people with contempt, deeming them all foolish and unprepared for what was to come. An intense fury burned within him. Every decision and every sacrifice had led him to this moment, and he would not tolerate anyone's weakness. He stood alone in the grand hall, a place that represented both power and solitude. The empty throne was a constant reminder of the burden he carried on his shoulders. But the anger gave way to a confident smile. He knew his plan was in motion and that none of those youths would be able to stop him. Before him, the elite candidates lined up, 6 young people representing the most powerful clans, each with their own ambitions and determination to win. The first was Muyon Cheon, from the Shadow Sect. His gaze was cold and calculating, a perfect reflection of the clan he represented. Next was Gongun Cheon, from the Sword Clan. His confidence was evident, a direct contrast to the first candidate's seriousness. The third, Murim Cheon, already seemed completely annoyed by the situation, making no effort to hide his displeasure. The fourth candidate, Jongsum Cheon, from the Poison Sect, observed everything in silence, with an indecipherable and dangerous expression. Yuchan Cheon, from the Saber Sect, was the fifth. His arrogant smile made it clear he considered himself superior to everyone else there. And finally, the sixth candidate, Wonryo Cheon. As the only woman in that year's elite group, her imposing presence did not go unnoticed. The leader watched the 6, the best among the best, but he knew someone was still missing from the presentation, the 7th student. Suddenly, all eyes turned to number 7. It was Cheon. Surprise and disdain were visible on the faces of the other students. The rumor spread quickly through the crowd. They said Cheon knew nothing about martial arts and would be the first to be eliminated. No one took him seriously. Cheon heard every word. The humiliation only strengthened his resolve. He thought they could laugh now, but they wouldn't be laughing for long. While the other candidates made their own arrangements, someone commented on how ridiculous Cheon looked, standing alone in the back, completely isolated. However, one of the observers found the scene curious. That boy, who kept himself apart from everyone, piqued his interest. Cheon found himself swallowed by the crowd of candidates gathered in the academy courtyard. The chatter was constant, and he was right in the middle of it all, feeling pressure from every side. Whispers spread quickly. All eyes and malicious comments were directed at Cheon, candidate number 7, but he didn't let it faze him. Cheon heard every word and only strengthened his resolve, ignoring the insults. Suddenly, his gaze met that of a red-haired man who was watching him from across the courtyard. The man responded with a challenging smile, as if questioning what the boy was staring at so intently. Just then, the sound of trumpets echoed through the area, silencing the crowd and announcing that the main event was about to begin. Excitement seized everyone. All eyes turned to the top of the staircase, from where the most important figures were finally approaching. And then, they emerged. The leaders of the demonic cult, including the Left Royal Guard, the Dark Lord, and the Patriarch himself, Yujong Cheon. Their presence was simply overwhelming. A respectful silence fell over the crowd. Everyone looked up with a mix of fear and admiration for the elite of power who had just arrived. Among the leaders, legendary figures like Mad Blade Seopmaeng and the masked Royal Guard stood out. The cream of martial arts was gathered there. As the 4 approached the throne, Cheon focused his gaze on the Patriarch. And in that moment, he confirmed what he already suspected. That man was his father. However, the imposing arrival of the leaders was marked by a moment of disorder. One of them, Mad Blade Seopmaeng, stumbled, clearly drunk, to his companion's surprise. The other leader didn't hide his irritation. He loudly questioned why Seopmaeng was dressed in such shabby clothes and in such a deplorable state, calling him a drunkard. Ignoring the scolding, Seopmaeng merely hiccuped and continued limping, clutching his bottle and his sword, completely indifferent to the ceremony. The small argument was interrupted by a chilling and intimidating glare that silenced both of them instantly. It was Ragyom Ma, the Dark Lord and head of the Royal Guard. With unquestionable authority, he simply ordered silence, putting an end to it. Meanwhile, the Patriarch moved to take his seat. He sat on the throne with such an overwhelming presence that it seemed to fill the entire courtyard, commanding respect and fear from all the young people present. The crowd of students felt the weight of that aura, becoming even more tense and anxious for what was to come. Whispers spread among the youths, commenting on the Patriarch's figure and the pressure they felt just by looking at him. Noticing the commotion, Ragyom turned to the crowd. His voice echoed throughout the courtyard, commanding absolute silence. Immediately, the noise ceased. All the students fell silent, awaiting the words of the demonic cult leader. With order restored, Ragyom bowed before the patriarch, as if signaling that everything was ready to begin. But the leader's reaction was unexpected. His fist clenched tightly, containing visible tension. A silent fury consumed his eyes, as if something had provoked him deeply. Suddenly, an overwhelming aura of power began to emanate from his body, making the surrounding air tremble and surprising everyone with its intensity. The wave of power hit the crowd head-on, making everyone instinctively recoil. They recognized it as a breathing technique of a level they could barely comprehend. Even Cheon felt the impact of that crushing energy. He had never witnessed such dense and controlled power coming from a single person. Then, the patriarch's voice echoed through the courtyard, declaring that there, in that academy, they would become the driving force propelling the cult into the future. The crowd's fear transformed into pure devotion. The leader's words ignited the young hearts, who shouted in unison, promising eternal glory. On the platform, the hierarchy was clear. While the crowd celebrated, the leaders bowed in total submission to the patriarch, showing the deepest respect. Ragyoma observed everything with a serious expression. The crowd's reaction and the leader's display of power seemed to be part of a larger plan. Amidst the collective euphoria, Cheon remained focused and distant. He didn't let himself get carried away by the moment's emotion, analyzing the situation coolly. From his place of power, the patriarch seemed to observe the crowd, as if his gaze sought that single point of silence amidst the chaos. After his speech, the leader turned away, ending contact with the youths. The welcoming moment had officially concluded. The patriarch's presence, however, awakened something within Cheon. A contained fury emerged, reflected in his eyes, which gained a reddish, dangerous glow. He let out a heavy sigh, a mix of frustration and resignation. That encounter wasn't what he expected, or perhaps it was exactly what he feared. The reason for his coldness was personal. Cheon remembered that man, the leader of all, hadn't even appeared when his own mother passed away. With the ceremony over, one of the instructors stepped forward. He announced that the welcoming speech was done and it was time to begin the real work. The atmosphere changed instantly, the tension dissipated, and the students began talking among themselves, curious about what would come next. But the crowd's chatter deeply irritated the instructor. He gritted his teeth, impatient with the new recruit's lack of discipline. The easy part was over. The instructor's patience ran out. With a shout, he questioned who had given them permission to talk, making everyone flinch instantly. The friendly atmosphere vanished. Immense pressure emanated from the instructor. His fury was so intense it seemed to distort the surrounding air, showing he wasn't messing around. He reminded everyone that from that moment on, they were no longer clan heirs or sect members. Within the academy, all privileges had been revoked. The instructor continued, explaining that each stage would have its own exam. And the rule was simple and brutal. Whoever failed any of them would be immediately expelled from the academy. The news dropped like a bomb. Whispers of concern spread through the crowd. The idea of only one chance per exam left everyone apprehensive about their success. Seeing their reaction, the instructor flashed a sinister smile. He confirmed they understood well. The academy was no place for the weak. Amidst the tension, a hand went up. Someone had the courage to interrupt. It was a noble-looking youth who seemed unfazed by the situation. He stated he had a question to ask. The interruption didn't please the instructor one bit. He glared at the youth and asked, with pure contempt, who had said he was accepting questions. The instructor challenged the youth, asking what he intended to do about it. The provocation was clear. Either he shut up, or he'd face the consequences. To make the threat even clearer, the instructor unleashed his energy. He warned that one false step could result in the youth's disqualification before the tournament even began. Faced with the display of power and the direct threat, the youth had no choice. He backed down and apologized, understanding he had crossed a dangerous line. The lesson served everyone, especially the heirs of the most powerful clans. The instructor made it clear that the rules applied to them without exception. With discipline restored, the instructor resumed his explanation. He said he knew everyone thought the chances were slim, but revealed a great reward for those who passed each stage. And the first reward was none other than a demonic dragon pearl. The name of that legendary item echoed through the crowd, awakening everyone's greed and surprise. And there it was, the promised reward. The legendary demonic dragon pearl shone before everyone, a treasure capable of changing the fate of any warrior who possessed it. Amidst the crowd, Cheon could barely believe what he saw. He recognized the item instantly, questioning if it was real or just an illusion. The other students began to whisper, spreading rumors about the pearl's power and what it could do for whoever acquired it. But for Cheon, this was different. It wasn't just a prize, it was a necessity. An essential tool to ensure his survival in that merciless place. The instructor then addressed everyone, explaining that the pearl was just the beginning. The true reward was unrestricted access to the Academy's martial arts manuals. He pointed to the Grand Library, a temple of knowledge that held secrets and techniques capable of transforming anyone into a master. The promise of learning divine techniques ignited hope and ambition in the students' hearts. For them, it was a chance to achieve unimaginable power. Cheon, however, remained focused. For him, it wasn't about glory, but life or death. Access to those manuals was the only way to survive what was to come. But there was a catch. With a cruel smile, the instructor assured them that none would reach the 5th floor of the library. The journey would be far harder than they imagined,